Welcome, everybody, to Chalice and Chains. My name is Sam, and today I am back after, God, what has it been, 4 years with some RPG commentary. I actually wanted to discuss today, as you can see from the overlay, Dark Age of Man, and I'm going to be doing a GM commentary on the session that I just ran, which is posted up on Roleplay Cafe Plus on YouTube. I will make sure to have a link to that video in the description below, so you want to check that out. I also do want to say that there will be some spoilers in this video, so if you do intend to watch that video, that actual play, you may want to do so first and then come back and watch this one. But yeah, it was and this is also in response to a video that Jason Graham, one of the co-writers of Dark Age of Man role-playing game, as well as one of the players in my game, he did a player reflections video, which I will also link, which is also over on Roleplay Cafe. And it was great. It was great to see that he had an enjoyable time and that he got to enjoy as a player the type of role-playing game that he likes to run, but often doesn't get to play very much. So I was happy that I was able to facilitate that for him. So what's interesting about Dark Age of Man, and if you haven't heard of it or you haven't checked it out already, it is available as a PDF on Drivethrurpg. It's pay what you want, so you can pick it up for free if you want to preview it. And I do hope that if you like it, you throw some money the creators' way so that they can continue to fund improvements. And I know they're currently working on hopefully the final stages of getting the full art book done and available, but it is the complete rule set. And so it is ready to go, ready to play right now. And I highly encourage you to play it. So let's talk about it a little bit. So Dark Age of Man essentially is a rules system that is designed to create a collective fiction told basically in real time among the presenter and the players. And the presenter is asked to be what is known as a naive narrator. What that means is that you haven't pre-scripted a full adventure like you might otherwise, right? You are asked instead to have sort of a basic setup, a basic hook that tells the players where they are in time right now, and kind of introduce a scene, have an inciting incident that causes the adventure to kick off, right? And then you will have come up with what was called a major dilemma and a minor dilemma, things that are causing trouble in this world that you're going to create, but nothing fleshed out, just like a sentence or two. So there's really good examples of these in the Dark Age of Roleplay PDF. There's 5, I think, adventures in the back of the book right now that give you kind of an idea of how to structure the adventure. But you do that, you create that, and then you have a table, a random seed chart, as it's called, with little sentences or words, or sometimes it's just a single word, sometimes it might be a short sentence, but basically they are little seeds that you can use and drop in whenever the role play, the action starts to wane or shift, or whenever you just feel like you need to introduce something into the world. And what it means is that for you as the presenter, you are only kind of coming into the game with very limited knowledge of the world and the situation and the setting that you're in. And you know possible things that could happen, but you don't have a track, a script to follow like you do in many other RPGs, right? If you're running a module, for example, or even in, more traditional D&D type systems, right? Where you are creating an adventure creation tends to follow the same formula with the same structure, which is that you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have encounters that are likely to happen, and you set the players on a path but you know the goal, you know the end point, you know where they're going, and you know largely what they're going to encounter on the way. It just depends on when and how they encounter it. Where Dark Age of Man is not like that. It is essentially you set them up and you let them go, and then you guys work together to figure out what's going to happen. And so the way that is done is by rolling on the random seed chart. So I'm going to show you here in just a second what that looks like so that you can kind of get an idea of how something like this would happen. Okay, so here are my notes that I did for session 1. So keep in mind, this is going to have some spoilers. So if you do want to watch the session over on Roleplay Cafe Plus, you may want to come back to this. But I'll show you how this works and kind of the structure for how you set up an adventure and then kind of what you roll with. So these notes have been changed a little bit. So it's not exactly what I was working with, but it's close enough. So, I have the title, right? And then basically you're asked, and the structure that you can see with this, you're asked for a setup, right? So the setup is essentially the beginning information. What do the players need to know about the world, about the setting as it's presented right now? So Dark Age of Man has a baked-in setting that you can choose to use. It is basically Dark Ages England, kind of a fantasy version of it, but it doesn't have to include fantasy like wizards and dragons if you don't want to. So I tend to run it, and I think Jason tends to kind of prefer it as well, to run it more as a quasi-historical game. But regardless, and it's based largely off of the Last Kingdom series, either on Netflix or even better, the series of books by Bernard Cornwell. So if you're familiar at all with that, you will kind of understand a bit the setting that this takes place in. And so I base this on that baked-in setting and also on previous events, on the results of a 4-session chronicle that I played in, which Jason was the presenter for. So this takes place 3 years after the events of that chronicle. And so the setup here is really just letting the players know. This part I give to the players, and I let them know what is happening, right? So, it's been 3 years since what we call the Miracle at Dredgewater, which was the last session. Says who's in charge of the town, what's been going on with some of the NPCs, talking about this fragile peace, and the Bishop Aethelwald heads north to meet with the King of Northwich to try to ensure a lasting peace. It's been 6 months and nothing has been heard. And so the people, and especially the Lord Westweld, are getting worried, right? And so that is essentially the setup for the game. And then what is the inciting incident? What is the call to action, so to speak? So it's Lord Westweld is basically saying, I need somebody to come help me. I need somebody to find my bishop, because... And what we say in the game, and this is a minor spoiler, but it's not that big a deal. He's really worried because he doesn't want to send men. He doesn't want to send armed men to find him, but he's running out of other options because he says, he's thinking, if I take my men away from Dredgetown, that leaves it vulnerable, and it could be viewed as a hostile incursion. So he's trying to figure out a way that somebody who he trusts and who's competent can go and find news of Bishop Aethelwald, and if he is still alive, bring him back, right? And then it asks you to come up with a major and a minor dilemma. And again, these can be, really, they shouldn't be very fleshed out. This is probably a little bit more than is necessary. I tried to keep them to about 1 sentence, but the point is the Danelands, which are just north of Dredgewater, are rumored to be entertaining Northwich men. Actually, it's probably the other way around. It's really Northwich is rumored to be entertaining Danes. But regardless, Lord Westweld fears that the the Kingdom of Northwich might be trying to kind of break the peace and recruit the Feared Danes to create conflict within Dredgewater. And so things aren't great. And if that's not bad enough, he's also dealing with bandits that have started raiding again on the borders of Dredgetown. And so he's been hard pressed to stop them. So it's another reason why he can't send troops, right, to find his bishop. And so how to earn repute is just what they can do that will earn them the experience to increase their stats and stuff for the next adventure. But the major thing here, the important thing here, is this random seed chart. And so what you do is you create a list, a 3d6 list, right, from with 3 to 18, kind of weighted more where the more extreme things happen on the outsides, and the more likely to encounter things will be in the middle. And so, sorry, I keep shaking my mouse and it's highlighting it, but you probably can't see it. But anyway, so what you do here is, after you've essentially set up the game and they're in the session and you're explaining things, initially you will roll one of these seeds to kind of start out the adventure. So as soon as we kind of got into things, I rolled on the chart and I rolled a 5. So on the chart, I had just written spies. Like, I didn't know what that was. I didn't plan that ahead of time. And it's literally just one word, spies. So I was like, well, geez, what am I supposed to do here? So what I'm thinking is, with the setup, right? What did I say? Well, I said he's really worried about what's going on with Northwich. Is there some kind of, are they planning to break the peace? So when I roll spies, I'm thinking, okay, so perhaps there are spies in town from Northwich that are trying to foment rebellion, something like that, right? Maybe they're trying to destabilize things. And so I introduced certain things. I don't want to go too much into detail, but I introduced some NPCs and some events that the characters witness and take part in, that kind of hint that there might be something going on in the town, right? But the game actually starts out with them, the two players in this case, Jason and Dell, entering the Lord's Great Hall for a feast, because he's been hosting a feast, and it's there that he talks to Dell's character. The Lord Westwell talks to Dell's character and basically says, I really need somebody to go find Aethelwald. And Dell was like, yeah, that's what I want to do too. And so they're like, cool, let's do it. And then Jason, I believe, ended up speaking to Vidar, who was Dell's character in the previous chronicle, and he was now considered like the man-at-arms and the military advisor, right? And he's acting sort of as like a guard for the Lord, because he really respects him. And so he is saying, like, things are not great here, like, I'm worried. And so ultimately that's how I used the setup and this first random seed to kind of set things in motion, right? And then they witness something, and they start to get the impression that not everything is right in Dredgetown. I'm not going to speak too much about the setup and the description other than that. Jason actually talked about it in his video, which, again, I'll have linked here. He did a player commentary video. But the Dredgetown that he introduced us to in his campaign was different than 3 years later, the one that I had introduced. But as the campaign started going along, and as there was a certain thing that Dell's character did that kind of hearkened in a bit of a return to what the old Dredgewater was like, which you can watch. But again, I'm trying to be a little vague to avoid spoilers. But anyway, so they're kind of wrapping up this roleplay scene, and so I roll another seed, and this time I rolled Alderman publicly denounces Lord Westweld. So With this, I wasn't exactly sure where I wanted to go with it because the idea was that Lord Westweld was holding these feasts mostly for his aldermen and for the influential people in town to kind of ingratiate them, but also to keep them, to remind them that, things were hard and now they're less hard. So I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to use this, but what I decided to do was in the previous campaign, there had been a certain alderman that was not too fond of the king and his, what do you want to call it? His Lord Father and all that. And so it was, he was there. And so I used this same guy um, to kind of be the catalyst for this particular seed. And so it was Lord Daedrin, Alderman Daedrin, which that's his first name. But he's one of the local aldermen. And so he was actually raising troops to oppose Westweld's father in the previous campaign. And Westweld kind of cowed him and brought him under heel. But now that things are not as good, I thought of it, well, the alderman now is thinking to press his advantage yet again. And so he publicly, for the first time in the 3 years, denounces the Lord and, is kind of fitting within this picture that we're starting to paint of a maybe dark and dangerous Dredgewater, right? Instead of the happy and prosperous Dredgewater that I had initially laid out. And so Jason's character kind of rebukes him, and there's words, but no violence or anything. And then finally, the alderman leaves, right? And so then they are going to make plans to go north, right? Dell's character and Jason's character decided that they were going to try to go north to find Aethelwald, right? And they have a plan, right? Jason's character has a boat. Dell has reasons to go, and Jason reveals later reasons why he would be helping to find the bishop, because he's just a merchant from London. He doesn't really have any history or ties to Dredgetown. So, but it's great, right? Because he had the freedom to do that. And so I ended up then rolling Drunken Son of Alderman starts a fight. So as things are progressing a little bit further, I run this and essentially also during this time to keep the spies sort of seed alive. I had mentioned that there was certain shady characters and that had been seen and they looked suspicious. And so Jason had his bodyguard follow one in particular who was actually seen as a thane or as an influential man to the Lord or the Alderman Aelric, I think, or Eric of Howardtown, which is a neighboring town and neighboring county, also big and fairly prosperous, and also the county in which the Lord's mother is currently residing in the church. So it's, they want them as an ally, right? And they've had, decent relations in the past, but this guy seems to be acting kind of weird. And so anyway, Jason's bodyguard follows his man, and later on comes back and mentions, oh yeah, this guy took coin. It seems like he's up to no good. And so Jason's character is going to tell Vidar about this. He's going to say, hey, there's some trouble going on, right? So he goes to his house, and before he's able to interact with him, this drunken alderman comes out of one of the taverns and starts, picking a fight with Jason's character because he's a foreigner and he's got an Arab bodyguard, right? And he's sickly. He looks kind of sick and whatever. And so this alderman is like, get out of here. Like, you're not wanted here, blah, blah, blah. Right. it's not great. And again, Jason's character rebukes him a little bit, and they have words, and it looks like it might turn to violence. And in fact, the alderman tries to punch Jason, and he gets out of the way, and the alderman's son ends up punching the door to Vidar's house, which then summons Vidar. He throws him out into the street, and I reveal that it was Alderman Daedrin's son. So I didn't have any reasoning behind that other than because none of this was scripted, right? So I did that as a kind of just a way to tie it in and to keep it as possibly a seed that could mature later. But I like the idea that the son of this alderman who just publicly rebuked the Lord, who, by the way, is generally well liked and popular because he saved the town from famine. He, he's drunk. He was up, not having a great time. So anyway, that happens. And then, he tells Vidar what's going on. Vidar says, okay, I'll check it out, but I got to talk to Samantha, who's the head of the Gold Leaf Inn. Jason happens to be staying there, so he goes back to the Gold Leaf Inn. He's getting his affairs ready, and then he comes downstairs because he starts hearing a loud ruckus. Well, the reason he's hearing a ruckus was because at that point, I had rolled the 4th time on the seed chart, and I rolled 9 religious fanatics. I was like, geez, what am I going to do with this, right? So I thought that based on the fiction that we had established to this point, where it seems like there's something political is going on, right? There is outside forces at work trying to destabilize the town, or at least it seems like it. There's, his alderman, at least one alderman is publicly denouncing the Lord. A neighboring alderman of some wealth and power is seemingly scheming in some way that we don't quite know yet. And then now there is, I roll a religious fanatic. So I thought, okay, well, the events of the Chronicle that we had played in essentially were about a pogrom started by the elder Lord Washburn, who's now deceased, against the pagans. It was this Christian pogrom against the pagans. And Bishop Athelwald, or Brother Athelwald at the time, was sent there to try to convert the pagans. The church kind of was like, do what you got to do. There was no concern about how to treat the pagans, just convert them, because they were a little bit worried that the pogroms might cause destabilization. So if you could get the pagans baptized and converted to Christianity without too much bloodshed, that would be better for everyone. Well, ultimately they succeeded in that. And so I thought, what if these religious fanatics were actual Christian religious fanatics that had come to the church after Athelwald had been granted some land and had started building the cathedral and had been there, had been influential, and they were generally, a good Christian sort. But now that he's been gone and gone for a long time, his influence has waned, and some of them have gotten more radicalized. Now, we don't know why yet, but more radicalized in their views. And so I thought, okay, that might be fun. And then I decided to make it even more impactful. Let's have a group of pagans show up as well. So before that, Dell's character, who's a monk, is out there tending in the garden and whatever, and these religious fanatics are there, and they're kind of giving him a hard time, and he's trying to tell them, like, don't, stop, go away, don't do this. Then the pagans show up, and it's a much smaller group of pagans than this Christian mob, which is fairly big. And that causes some consternation, right? And so they're basically like, get out of here, we don't want you. And the pagans are like, look, we don't want to have any fights, but we are worried. We don't want to have what happened to us before happen again. So we're here to defend the town and the Lord if necessary, right? So tensions are getting higher and higher. And then finally, Vidar shows up with about 6 of the town guard. But again, he's outmatched because this large mob of Christian fanatics is there. And so ultimately, it's a really tense situation. And so it's at that point that I kind of bring it back full circle. And I think Jason hinted at it, but basically I was like, oh yeah. And Yami, your bodyguard, comes over and tells you that the guy that he saw taking coin, from Lord Alderman Eric's man, he's there. He's in the crowd. He's this big Dane. He's there in the crowd. So, he's suspicious, right? And so Jason was like, in his character was like, go get him, bring him to me. I want to talk to him and do whatever you have to do to make that happen. Well, we're in a violent situation, or a tense situation that could turn violent. Yami is a bodyguard. He's used to fighting. And this is a large Dane that is armed, and he tries to attack him. And so mechanically, I had Jason make the appropriate rolls, but he was not successful in his attack against this guy because this Dane is pretty well. He's a pretty good fighter. And so what ended up happening was that was like the powder keg that blew up and incited the violence, right? So, and I decided to end it there on a cliffhanger because I thought that that would be a really fun way to kind of end it and then pick up another session later. But I had no idea going into the session where we were going to go, what was going to happen. I had nothing scripted out, right? Nothing pre-planned other than what I had already showed you here, right? How to earn, or the major and minor dilemmas, the inciting incident, the setup, and then I had the random seed chart. And so as a game master, as the presenter for this system, that for me is it's perfect. It is the best way. No, I shouldn't say that. It suits my style of game mastering and role playing perfectly. And so I'm very happy about that. And I know Jason and I have a very similar way that we like to run games and play games. And he essentially created a game that he wanted to play. And so, and it just happened to fit really well with my own proclivities. So I was really impressed by this system. But I was a little bit nervous about it because I wasn't sure how I was going to work this without some more structure. All right, so through the magic of editing, I made the Google Doc disappearo, and now I'm big again. I wasn't really sure how any of this stuff was going to work out. And so without that structure that you see from a traditional RPG like Dungeons and Dragons, for example, that can feel very intimidating to some people. And so I wanted to end this video by saying that this was probably one of the more satisfying games that I have run. And I had no doubt that it would be because I know the type of role player that Jason and Dell are. Their style complements mine very well. And so with any game, any system, any rules set, if you got the right players, you're going to have a great time. But what is particularly wonderful about this system is that it encourages a collective improvisational role-playing style that, if done right, will allow you to really create this fiction together. But what's really amazing is, as the presenter, I'm almost as naive as the players as to what's going to happen, right? Because again, you can see I didn't pre-plan anything. So I had to make this stuff up on the fly. And it was liberating. It was fantastic. It was so much fun because I was experiencing this along with them, which most games that I've run has not, they have not produced that result, right? I've had fun seeing how the players were reacting to the things that I knew were going to happen. But in this case, I didn't know what was going to happen until it happened. So essentially, you are experiencing this world and this story as it's being told in real time. And I think that can be hard to pull off in other games. But in this game and in this system, the rules are designed to do exactly that. So I have another video that I'm going to put up that talks about sort of the barriers to entry for this game, mostly from the presenter GM side, but a little bit from the player side as well. So I'll put that at the end of this video. Make sure that you take a look at that. But I think that I just want to end this by saying I really encourage anybody who enjoys this type of role playing, that more conversational, cooperative type of role play where you create a fiction together. Check out this game. It's really good. Take care, everybody.